Life was before I'd had this accident. It was a very dramatic accident, obviously, and was on a downward spiral, I would say. I'd left school with no qualifications, really, hardly at all, because I'm dyslexic, and I didn't realize that at the time. So life was a bit of a struggle making ends meet. I'd moved to London hoping to sort of just make a change of that because, like all capital cities, you're drawn there because you think the opportunities are going to be waiting. But of course, that wasn't really the case for me. I was picking up mainly sort of blue collar work, working on construction sites, and I wasn't actually very good at that either because I'm not cut out for it at all. These guys around me were just fantastic at their work, and so I started to run out of that kind of work as well, and I was broke, and I lost my apartment and everything, and so it was at that point that I'd gone to stay with my sister for a few weeks and her family in Cambridge, out in the country, because she said you need to come and be with us for a while. So I stayed there. I'd met somebody who I connected with just a few weeks before this in London, and we just hit it off together. As friends, it was a great chemistry, and she came to visit me while I was staying in Cambridge, and
Yes.
she got to get back to London. So I was seeing her off at the
My
rail station, and seeing her off. She got to get back to London. So the train came in, and I was helping her with her bags and saying goodbye. And as the automatic closing doors closed, somehow my coat got trapped, and I couldn't pull it free. I tugged as hard as I could. It was a very thick sheepskin coat, so it wasn't going to come out. I looked around for a guard on the platform, but there was no one there, and I just yelled at the top of my voice for help and was trying everything, banging on the windows, hoping somebody would run through, but that didn't happen. So I remember looking into the eyes of my friend Anna, who I was seeing off, and I just saw absolute terror in her face. And I thought at this point, this is it. I'm going to die. I didn't think I was going to survive this. I heard the engines revving up, and then the train started to pull out the station at great speed. You really don't realize how fast they go until something like this happens. I heard every gear shift, and then I lost my footing and I was dragged along the platform. And then I was pulled between the space of the platform edge and the speeding train, and under I went. Um, I was fully conscious throughout all this because I went into fight or flight mode, as they call it, and I decided to fight. So uh, it was like being pulled down into this darkness, and I've been tossed around relentlessly like a rag doll. And it just felt like me, this flesh and bones against this huge beast of a mechanical beast, as it seemed at that point. And I was then thrown to the ground in between the rail tracks as the train continued on. And I just kept my head down. I kept my face into the gravel because I thought it's not over yet. I could just get hit by the part of the undercarriage. And thankfully I didn't. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking now. And the train sped off down the track eventually, which seemed to take forever to go on. And there I was, looking up at this beautiful blue sky. It was a February day, cold day, but the sky was just like completely cloudless. And I just remember looking at that sky and feeling in touch with that sky and nature, because what I'd just been through was just such a vile and violent experience, and obviously terrifying. Um, so the emergency guys arrived fairly quick actually because there was a small hospital just around the corner. So they were there like within minutes. They jumped down onto the track and started cutting through my clothes, and they could see I was in a pretty bad state. Yeah, I remember seeing that my arm was ripped right open, my left arm. In fact, I found out afterwards that it had actually been cut from the elbow down. So they got me onto somehow off that track because it's a long drop, as you'll all know, down to a rail track. And they then got me into an ambulance. And the doctor said, "Look, there's a hospital around the corner that we come from, but the one that's going to save you is a 25-minute drive. Can you hang on?" I said, "Yeah, let's go." So we sped off like a rocket down the highway. And I remember we arrived at the hospital, and there was a whole team of medics all there waiting, and I thought, well, this looks pretty serious. And they got to work on me. And I knew it wasn't all over yet because I could hear fear in their voices, and I didn't know understand what they were talking about. It was all science, just going backwards and forwards over my head. My family arrived. They were at the hospital really quick, and I don't know how they got there, but they did. And so they came to see me, and my mother was in tears. And I remember saying to her, I said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. It's always me bringing the dramas to this family because it seemed like it was." And she said, "It's not your fault," which of course it wasn't. But that's the kind of place I was in at that point, that I felt like a failure, and everything that I did was not, that was trouble. And um, anyhow, it was pretty much at that point that they were just about to take me into theatre, into surgery, and to start work on me. That um, my family were there. Then I suddenly left all this drama. I left all the pain that was rushing through my body, and suddenly I was in a completely different realm, in a different place altogether. And it felt like I was in a really beautiful darkened space. And I looked around to get my bearings to see where I was and what was going on. And I saw these, first of all, I saw these beautiful orbs slowly pulsating all around me. And that made me feel very calm, because I pretty much knew at this point that I hadn't survived. That's what I told myself. I thought, I clearly didn't make it, and I'm dead. Now, I know that since looking into NDEs, that some people resist that and try and fight it and try and combat, because they've got so much to live for with their families and everything. But for me, I didn't want to die at all. But it was such a lovely contrast to be in this space from what I'd just been through, that I decided to go with it, and I didn't fight it. And I realized at this point that I was no longer laid on the hospital trolley, but I was laid out on a huge slate rock. It was almost like a medieval altar, is the best way I could describe it. And you would think that would be uncomfortable to lie on, but it wasn't. It was very comfortable. And despite the fact that I also realized that I was no longer clothed, I was just covered in this blue sheet. It was like a satin, sort of silky sort of texture to it, and I felt very comforted by this sheet. And the light, there was light reflecting off it, and I kind of looked up and I laid my head back, and as I laid back, I saw like these three grids of pure white light that were slowly coming in towards me. And I gazed into that light, and it was so bright and intense that normally the human eye would not be able to take it, but in this realm it was perfectly fine. In fact, I couldn't take my gaze away, because it felt like it was healing me. It felt like it was a beautiful energy that was good. So I just laid my head back and sort of bathed in this light, if you like. And then I felt the presence of somebody near me, and I thought, there's somebody here. So I lifted my head, and as I lifted my head, there was a person just stood at my feet, an androgynous being, just wearing a simple contemporary black t-shirt, nothing too ethereal, just this simple t-shirt with this pure white sort of blonde hair, if you like, and the skin that was glowing light from within. And I knew this person. I was looking at this person's face, and I was going, "I know you, don't I? But where do I know you from?" And this person just kept smiling back at me and said nothing. But I felt reassured uh, by this being, that I felt that this was somebody who was like basically guarding me, and who was there to greet me and to tell me that everything was fine. So I felt again more comfort from this, and laid my head back and decided just to absorb all this lovely energy that was coming from these beautiful white lights. And then I felt the presence of um, more people, and I again lifted my head and I looked, and there were two female forms either side of me, and they'd already got their hands slowly hovering over my body, and holding onto my shoulders and my arms, and they were healing me. And again, they were wearing very well. Actually, the girl to my right was wearing a simple brown dress, and she looked kind of European, white Caucasian, sort of, and long brown hair. Whereas the girl to my left was more American Indian or Asian Indian in appearance, and she was wearing a more traditional dress. and the energy that was coming from their hands was just so powerful that I started to feel this sensation of love that was going through every single molecule of my body, and I felt like I was starting to almost vibrate with this love. It's hard to explain, but it was just such an intense and beautiful feeling. And I figured at this point that they were clearly healing the trauma that I'd just been through in the accident itself, and healing my body. But not only that, I also was aware that they were healing my soul. They were healing all the sort of trauma that I've been through throughout my life. As I said to you earlier, all the feelings of shame and guilt and anxiety. I carried a lot of anxiety around, and I felt like all that was being healed, and I felt like all those layers were just being peeled off me, and one by one, and it was just the pure essence of my soul that was underneath, that was for the first time in my life, felt at one and felt at peace, and it was a really tremendous feeling. um so I started to think about my family, because I thought, well, they're going to be in the hospital. They were pretty torn up about what they'd just seen, and they were all in tears. And well, my mum was, as I say, and they were all pretty torn up. Then I thought I better check on them and see how they're doing, because they're not going to be feeling too good now. So I lifted my head from this rock and figured if I looked over the edge that I might see them and get a glimpse of them. So I looked down and hoping to, but I couldn't actually see them. I couldn't see that hospital at all. But what I did see was this amazing sight. The best way to describe it was a waterfall of stars, basically, and I would equal it to something like the size of Niagara. It was like absolutely, sort of an awesome sight. And instead of tons of water cascading over the edge, it was millions of stars that were just sparkling, and it was like, wow, this is like incredible. And I looked down into this waterfall of stars, and the further I looked, I could see that it was going from one galaxy into another, and my the field of vision started to sharpen, and I started to see colors and nebulas, and it was like I was looking from one universe into another. And I realized that I was no longer in what I figured to be a small darkened space. I was in the universe itself, and I was sensing the energy of the universe, and it was very profound. So I was just going, wow, in the wonder of all this. And I lifted my head over, and I just figured, okay, well, I can't see my family now, but they're going to be okay. I'm going to see them hopefully one day here in this space, or if I don't, they're going to be enjoying all the wonders and the beauty of what I'm now experiencing. And so I didn't. It's interesting that I'd lost all that sense of me of old, would have been feeling awful and worried about them, but worried for all the wrong, well, not the wrong reasons, but sort of all the anxiety issues would have hit in. But I didn't feel anxious at all. Sorry, and I just rolled back over, and it was a little bit further on that I would say that the most profound moments happened, because I was laid out again, feeling all this love coming through to me, this unconditional love, and I felt like this energy that was coming from these beings it was suddenly turned up, like the dial had been turned up, and I thought, wow, something's going on here. Um, so I looked, and just beyond me, just beyond the actual being who was still guarding me at my feet and smiling at me, was a huge tunnel of white light that was slowly coming towards me. And this tunnel of white light was just so immense and bright, and again, this pure white light in the middle. But it was surrounded by all these dramatic flames that were slowly sort of like circulating around this tunnel of energy and whiteness. And I thought, wow, this now my body is, every single molecule of my body is just vibrating with this love. And I thought, and because there's a lot of telepathy going on at this point, and I knew what I was looking at here was the source of all creation. This was God, this was not the usual sort of form of God that we're used to seeing. Well, what most faiths are is that in some kind of human form. In Christianity, the image of God on the ceiling of the Vatican. This was no, this was a big, huge tunnel of white light, and this is where it all comes from. And that's what I was being told, and that's what I was feeling. And it was pretty much at that point, as I laid my head back in all this happiness and wonder, that I came crashing back into my body, into the pain and anxiety of the hospital. Um, Everything was on overdrive when I came back. Like sound and vision. The light and the noise was just too much to deal with. It was just like piercing in both elements. Um, but it was interesting because most people say to me, you must have been really disappointed that you come back, because it wasn't my choice to come back. The choice was made for me. But interestingly, I didn't feel that at all, because I was so charged still with all this wonderful energy of love that I'd still got it going through me, and I felt like I'd still got this kind of umbilical cord, if you like, still attached to this realm. And but all I could think was, why have they sent me back? What's my purpose now? What is my goal, and what is my mission? And couldn't wait to tell everybody about it. In fact, Anna, my friend who I've been seeing off, was stood next to me as I was just about to take me through. And I said, Anna, I've got something really important to tell you. And she said, not now, David. Wait until later. I said, no, you've got to hear this now. And she put her hand over my mouth softly and said, it can wait. And I thought, okay. And so yeah. Off I went. They wheeled me into theatre, and I was there for about 8 hours, and for the first lot of intense surgery. And then I remember waking, coming through from the anaesthetic, and they gave me my own room in the hospital because of the severity of my injuries and stuff. And I remember just lying in this room and just coming through, and part of me was dealing with obviously with the human trauma of what I'd just been through, that because it was a terrifying accident, and also the pain that I was dealing with, because I could hardly move. I was lying on this bed with all these tubes coming out of me, and there was like this little monitor next to me that was just bleeping in the dark, like R2D2 in Star Wars or something, and it was just me and that machine. So I got a lot to sort of take in, but the main thing that I was really thinking about and couldn't stop thinking about was this experience that I just had. I knew nothing about near-death experiences at this stage. I was non-spiritual, and so it hadn't. It was like a shock to me of what happened, and I just thought, "Am I the only person who's experienced this?" And how am I going to tell people about this? Because I've got to. And I remember figuring at that point straight away that I thought, I'm going to do a painting. I'm going to paint it, but it's got to be a huge canvas. I'd never done anything like this before, but I thought it's got to be like the big Michelangelos that you see, all these Renaissance paintings where they're biblical scenes that are so dramatic that you can't miss them. And I thought, that's how I'm going to tell my story. So um, I remember my sister was one of the first visitors who came in, and I remember she was just about to leave that night, and we were sat there in quiet chatting. And then she said quietly to me, she said, look, I'm going there, but is there anything I can get you to bring in tomorrow? And I said, yeah, can you get me a small sketch pad and a pencil? And she looked at me quite shocked, and she said, okay. And she followed through my wish. And I remember the nurses propping me up in that bed and helping me to get this little sketch pad. And I've still got it. I've still got the first sketch that I did. And I tried to get everything in there. And it's like this very faint pencil sketch. And so really that was like the basis of the very first painting that I did. But of course, I never forgot any of it. And there was no real need for me to fear that. But obviously, at that stage, it was so important to me to make sure that I got everything there in that little sketch pad, and I continued to sketch while I was recovering in hospital. What I'd seen and what I'd felt as well. So when I got out of hospital, I recovered I stayed at my sister's house with her family, and started to recover there. and I got that first canvas, and it was leant against the wall. I remember in the room that I was recovering in. I kept looking at it, and part of me was thinking, I can't wait to start this, but part of me was also apprehensive because, I'm not trained in this area, and I thought I can't mess this up. This has got to be right. Our people have got to understand this. So, um, some friends of my sisters and her husband run like a local yoga and Pilates center, and they came in and to visit quite regularly. And they said, "What's this canvas here?" And I said, "Oh, it's a painting. And I can't start it yet because there's not enough light in here. It's too small and stuff." And I was putting obstacles there. And Jane, who was the friend, said, "Look, we've got a studio that's going to be free for a week because we're redecorating. You can come and use that and start there." So I said, "Great." So I did. And I got to the end of that week. And of course, I was nowhere near even started on it. And they let me stay. They said, "Look, you can stay. We'll move you around, you know." And I ended up staying there for 2 years free of charge. They didn't charge me. And I became known as the artist in the attic. And people would come up and see me who were coming in for yoga and Pilates sessions, and they would ask what the painting was about. And that's when I realized that people I tell my story were really fascinated by it and wanted to hear. So that helped me to be able to start talking about it. But not only that, I was also being helped, I realized, to actually do this painting because what was going on this canvas was was starting to really amaze me. It was all coming together very easily. There was no sort of struggle with this at all, and it was just starting to come to life on this canvas. And I thought, I'm being helped here. And I was channeling help from somewhere else because, as I said earlier, I still felt this energy that I was still attached to this realm. I thought they're helping me put this painting together. And I thought this is probably what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be creating, you know, uh, images of the afterlife to try and tell my story because that's how it was coming across and that's how people seem to be learning about it. And so, as I say, I stayed in the studio space up in the attic and kept creating. I couldn't stop. I was prolific. I was painting, and um, um, but I was very keen to talk to people who might know more about what had happened because I'd already started looking up online what had happened. Then I'd realised by then that I read about near-death experiences, and in fact, I came across Dr. Raymond Moody, and I sent him a copy, like a photograph of the very first painting that I'd done, and he wrote back to me after a couple of days and said he thought it was amazing, and I didn't know much about Dr. Raymond Moody. It was just by chance that I'd come across him, and of course, you may know of him that he actually coined the phrase near-death experience. He did loads and lots of research dating back from the 1960s. So, yeah. So I was keen to find out more, as I say, and I knew there was a spiritualist church that was based near to where my sister was living, because going back 2 months or so previous, I think it was, to the accident, I'd been coming up to visit my sister and her family, and when I was on the train, this is going back, as I say, before all this happened. I bumped into this couple who were on the train, and they started chatting to me and wanted to know where the station was and all that kind of information. And I said, "Yeah, it's the next stop." And the lady who was sat there said, "Look, we're going to see a medium tonight. She's very good. She's called Julian Knight. She's not big, but she's very, very good." So, "Oh, okay, great." And I wasn't really interested at all at that point. I wasn't in a good space, as I say, and but she insisted on giving me this flyer, and I put it in my pocket. And I remember I arrived at my sister's, and there was a lot of mayhem going on with her kids at the time, and I just thought, I'm going to go. I'm going to go and see this medium and just see what it's all about. And she was great, actually. She was brilliant. It was packed. It was a small spiritualist church, and everyone that she spoke to, she was giving very, very good and thorough messages. Most people had gone there because they just lost their loved ones and were looking for connection, and a lot of people got that connection. And I thought, this is really lovely. And I wasn't looking for anything myself, but she suddenly turned around and said, a man in the blue sweater over there, and that was me. And she said, "They're telling me that your life's about to change, and it's going to be very big." And I went, "Oh, great!" And I just thought, does this mean I'm going to win the lottery? Does this mean I'm going to, get the job that I was after? All those kind of things. And so I was just thinking a material end game in all this. And I said, "In what way? And what do you mean? How's it going to change?" And she was walking around like this. And I remember she was very animated. She was like talking to me. She was going, "Yes, yes, yes. Okay, okay, I've got it." And then she turned around to me. She said, "They're not telling me. They just said it's going to be very big and be ready for it. You'll be fine. You will be fine." I said, "Okay." So clearly, I thought I've got to go back and find this church because I want to speak to this medium and talk to her again, or speak to some of the people at the church itself. And my sister used to take me for walks when I was recuperating, and we used to walk to the river. And then one summer's day, we were walking back through this passageway, and I said, "There it is. There's the doorway," because it's very unassuming. It doesn't look like a church. It's just like an old building, in this alleyway. And I said, "That's the church. That's the place." So I went in, and I sat through the service, and a lady came over to me then and said, "Look, you look in a pretty bad way there. We do spiritual healing, and we don't normally invite people to come along, but I just figured you might want to be interested in that." I said, "Yes, I am." So I went for spiritual healing, which I found incredibly beneficial, because it was helping me in my healing process. It was helping my body to heal from the accident. In fact, the consultants at the hospital had to keep going in, like, 2 or 3 times a week. We're turning around, each of them saying, "You're recovering really well and really fast. Do you know that?" And I said, "Yeah, I know." And I said, I started to explain that I think that I'm being helped spiritually here. And of course, they're scientists, and they didn't want to entertain that part of the conversation. But that's fine, because without science, I know that I wouldn't be here chatting. That they saved my life. Um, also, um, so yeah, so when I was having these spiritual healing sessions, a few of the healers were mediums. They would give me just very short messages at the end. Not every time, but sometimes they would pick something up. Like they'd say, "Oh, I was feeling like a white energy that was going through, to your left arm," and I said, "Yeah, that needs a lot of healing at this point." And then um, they started to say one after another, a few of them independently, that they were picking up music, and they were saying things like, "Why am I seeing a violin laid across your chest?" And I said, "I have no idea." And then one of them turned around and said, "They're telling me that you're going to write a piece of music about your experience." And I went, "That's it. Okay, that's what it's about." So I went back home, and I went with the same ambition to start writing something. And all I got was this old, it was like an old cheap synthesizer that was in my cupboard, and I just pulled it out. It was up in the loft or whatever, and I dusted it down, plugged it in, and I just got a cassette recorder, and I thought it was just going to be a song that I was going to be writing, because I knew nothing more than that. But it started to develop into something that felt bigger than that. And again, I'd still got this ambition and this drive to make sure that it was bigger than that. And I thought, this feels like it should be something that an orchestra should play. And I started to develop it, and I'd made friends with a cello player who used to come and visit me at the center where I was painting, and we'd become friends. And we used to meet for coffee. And she said, "What are you up to?" And I explained about this, and she joked and said, "Oh, maybe our orchestra could perform it." And I thought, why not? So um, my brother turned around to me and said, "Look, I've got some software that you can attach to your computer, and we'll get you a keyboard. And when you play on this keyboard, it will transform your notes when you record it. It will transform it into notation, so the orchestra can have sheet music to look at." So that's what I did, and I started developing I started hearing new sounds. I thought, if this is going to be for an orchestra, it needs more than just the violins or whatever. And I started hearing horn sounds and flutes and all sorts, and I started putting them all in there and threw the whole thing in. Met my friend again for coffee, And I told her, I said, look, remember that conversation we had? I said, well, I've written a piece of music and I've scored it up. Do you think you would be interested in having a look? So she said, let me talk to the orchestra. They agreed. So they met me and they looked it over and they said, yeah, we'll perform it. And they did. And it was remarkable because they said to me, "Oh, would you mind saying a few words to the local press? Because that's what we normally do if somebody's written a piece." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I spoke to the local press and they said, "You're the guy who went under the train." I said, "Yes." And they said, "Oh, this is a great story. This is going on the front cover." So it did do. And then the phone started ringing. And then the BBC came. They said that we want to come and interview you at the rehearsal. I said, "Great." So after the BBC turned up, that was it. The concert sold out 2 weeks in advance. And this was great because I felt again that I was being helped, not only with my painting and my music, but I felt that I was being helped to make this come together to a sellout concert. And the atmosphere that at the premiere was just it was just tremendous. It was beautiful, and I'd hardly got any nerves at all. In fact, I just enjoyed it from start to finish, listening to my piece being performed because the energy was just so amazing. It was people. There were more people in there than there should have been. People stood against the walls, and people had turned up because they'd seen. They came up to me and said, "Look, I've had an experience similar to yours, and I was drawn to come and listen to this and stuff." So, yeah, it was really it was it came to an end, and my mum was sat again next to me again in tears, but this time tears of joy and pride. And she said, "That was just beautiful, David." And I said, "Thank you, Mum." And I hugged her really tight. And then my sister was saying, "David, look behind you." I said, "What?" And so I looked behind, and there was a standing ovation, and it was just like, wow, it was just so humbling and just so touching and beautiful to experience that whole event. Yeah.